Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online Let's Talk video with me, Sherman. And as the title says, bringing the right tools of the trade, or using the right tools of the trade, sorry. So what does that mean? Have you guys ever heard that phrase, using the right tools of the trade? It's a term that's been used by mechanics. It's been a term used by gardeners, all kinds of stuff, all throughout the world for a long time. And that means that if you use the right tools, you can do the job and be effective at it. Some tools are going to give you a better thing. Like, say, for example, doing yard work. What's going to work better? A weed eater lawnmower combo or a rake hula hoe lawnmower combo? See, they work differently, but they still do the same jobs. It's just a matter of use. And a lot of people don't take that into consideration. They see something, they say, oh, well, that doesn't work because it's not utilizing the right thing. So I'm going to show you guys. This is a tank build I created just to show you. To use as a tool to show you how you can do this. So this is a tank build, and I want to show you where the stats are set up. So 10k magicka, 35k health, 25k stamina. I have 22k resistances, 22k spell, 21k physical. Now for a tank, a lot of people are going to be like, well, that's really low. This is what I look like buffed up. Now I'm going to show you the gear I'm running. So I'm running 2-piece trimmer scale, 3 pieces of my gear, my heaviest pieces, my helm, my chest, my legs are infused. Everything else is sturdy. On my jewelry, I'm using 1 block cost reduction, 2 weapon damage, and I'm wearing 5-piece berserker. Now the reason I'm showing you it with this setup is because this is an off-tank build that I was working on, and then I went back and did some adjustments, tried it with another set. We'll get to that other set here in a second. So I'm going to use what I have, and it's 5-piece berserker, 2-piece trimmer scale, 3-piece endurance, and 2-piece master sword and shield on both bars. And one is using infused with a damage shield. The other one's using Nirnhoned with a frost enchant. Now the reason I did this is so I could show you guys how you can make this make a build with certain things and make it really effective no matter what you do, just as long as you utilize the right tools. So I'm going to go down here. I'm going to parse on the skeleton one time, and I'm going to show you guys how this works. So right now we're going to just do a little simple parse of a tank versus a skeleton. I'm going to show DPS so you guys can see for yourself. As you can see, I'm doing about 5k and stuff. I'm going to go ahead and drop Dawnbreaker just because it's going to add extra DPS. Oops, that was one too many. Come on, attack. I'm going to wait until the caltrops wear off this time. Alright, so there we go. 5,228 or 238 was my DPS. Okay? Tanks, that's not a lot. That's normal for a tank, in fact. For most tanks, that's normal. But that 5,000 something damage per second adds up really fast. And a lot of people don't realize that. So, you guys saw this build. Now I'm going to switch the build. I'm only going to switch one thing about the build. I'm going to switch to Alkosh on the back bar, or on the build. And Alkosh full time. Just so you guys can see. So necklace of Alkosh, ring of Alkosh, another ring of Alkosh. And now I have Alkosh set up on both bars. Now if you look, a lot of things changed already. My stats all that stuff changed. And I don't mean my stats quite like that. I need to change my stats. So I'm just going to change just the stats now, and that's it. I'm not going to change anything else, just the stats and the gear. So just want to make sure I get this right. And I'm going to put it right as close as I could get it to the last one. So let's do this. Alright, so there we go. There we go. So this that's pretty close to what I had with the other one. See, I'm still running the same food. I get Miner Slayer now, and I have the Lady Mundstone, same thing as before. Resistances are exactly the same, except for when I switch bars. They drop a little bit. But The weapon damage and stuff changed, and that's because Alkosh gives me greater weapon damage. Now, it doesn't give me greater health and stuff, but that's fine. I don't need the greater health and stuff. I need what else it gives me, which is that synergy ability to apply the extra penetration on the enemies. But if you look, it does 13k damage for my guy, with 13,520 physical damage over 10 seconds, reduces the physical and spell resistance by 2,940 when I synergize. But I'm also gaining Minor Slayer. That weapon critical and that weapon damage is also going to apply to my character. Now I'm going to show you that same setup that I had before. I'm gonna alter a few things. So we're gonna go ahead and take caltrops off the back bar. We're gonna take this off the back bar. We're gonna change heroic slash to the front bar. That's all we're gonna do, is just that. Then on the back bar, we're gonna change up what weapons, our weapon skills. We're gonna grab Blood Craze and Deadly Cloak. Now I'm gonna show you guys also, just so you guys can see. On this, I'm using a hardening enchant, just like my other sword and board, but I'm also using a crusher enchant here with a frost enchant. Now, the reason I did this is so I could get the crusher enchant applied, and I can get that applied. Now, I'm going to show you what happens when I get totally buffed up, again, and we go through the process of maximizing this build's DPS. And I'm not even using Dawnbreaker yet. There we go, Dawnbreaker. We're going to wait for Blade Cloak to wear off and Dawnbreaker to wear off. So, and Twin Slashes. Once all that's done, Twin Slashes is gone. Blade Cloak is almost gone. I'm just going to sit here and do this. Now that's 8,050 damage that I just did with that. That's 3k more than what I was doing with Sword and Shield. But here's the thing that a lot of people don't understand. This is what I mean by bringing the right tools, or using the right tools of the trade, is this. See, when you play an off-tank, it's not a matter of utilizing the right gear, like playing the same tank as the main tank. It's about utilizing what your character is capable of when they're not tanking. And that's what I just showed you. When I'm not tanking, I can bring extra DPS for the group. It's not a lot, but that extra DPS adds up really fast. And the fact that I can keep the Crusher enchant applied more effectively than the single tank can, than a main tank can, means that that's what my job can be. Now, who else can use a Crusher enchant as effective as a tank? 1 DPS. So if you have your main tank and your off tank, and one of your DPS running a Crusher enchant, very similar to what I have set up here. So on their bow, they're using an infused bow with the weapon damage thing. On their main two-hand or dual wield side, they can run a Crusher enchant with a offhand damage enchant. They can make their offhand weapon Nirnhoned, with their main hand weapon being infused, and it will give them a good amount of DPS because it increases their weapon damage. Now this is its 5 pieces of heavy armor I'm doing this. Now just imagine if I was running this same setup on a Nord in medium armor. If I was running something similar to Berserkers, like say Hunting's Rage. Now I'm going to get even more weapon damage out of my character, which is going to boost my overall DPS and everything else. This is what it means by bringing the right tools of the trade. Is utilizing your character to do what's best for the group. And this is one of the reasons that, like, I see the meta and I say, okay, it's cool, it works, but it doesn't give me variety, it doesn't give me options. And that's what I mean by that, is like, it gives me the tools of the trade, but it doesn't give me the tools of the trade in what I like to play. Like, if they had a Templar version, I would do it. But this is a warding that I did this with. And I just showed you guys, all I did was change the gear and the weapons, like what I had on the back bar, and that. Now I'm going to show you guys something else. I'm running the same enchants, 2 weapon damage and 1 shield play. on both of these. So if I go over here and I show you, the necklace has shield play on it. Both of these are weapon damage. There's no difference in how they work. They have different benefits. And that's what gear can do for you as a player, is give you different benefits. The champion points I didn't change. I didn't change the skills like too much, and I didn't change my gear too much. I just gave it a better option. Or I gave it a different option. Same setup. Almost the same attributes, in fact. Almost. 10k, I'm 2k shy on the health with 25k stamina. And that was because of the way I set it up. Now, can I reach higher stamina in magicka and health and all that? Yeah. I could do it really easy. Just use tri-stat glyphs on all my gear. And if I went prismatic on everything, well, guess what? I'm going to get greater resources out of my character and still be able to do the same thing I'm doing now, but better. Because now I can push my health higher with those tri-stat glyphs. I can push my stamina higher with those stamina glyphs. And I'm going to have, I might not be able to get the same health, but I can definitely get close to it or better. And I can get better stamina pool, which means greater damage per second. As an off-tank, that's super important. Because I'm not tanking 100% of the time. There's times where I'm not tanking barely at all. And I'm just standing there doing really not much of anything except popping Warhorn and Vigor. Well, this character still has Vigor and Warhorn. I just showed you. Here's Vigor. Here's Warhorn. The only thing I do differently with them is I make them to be a damage dealer. Which gives me greater advantage to my group. I'm utilizing the same tools as I was before. I'm just utilizing them in a different way. Now, a lot of people like to run Alkosh on a tank with medium, with the sword and shield, the jewelry, and they like to run, 5 pieces of Ebon with it. That's fine. If you want to do that, that's fine. But you're not going to get the benefits that this build has. Because this build has greater benefits than you do, because it has greater capabilities of doing DPS. That's something you don't have with that off-tank. And this is a lot of the reason why, like when I make my builds, I create them this way for a reason, to give them greater benefit, so that they work better at what I'm trying to do. And I just did that with a Red Guard. Now I can do the same thing with a Wood Elf, I can do the same thing with an Argonian, with a Khajiit. With any race in the game, you can do the same things. You can give them the same setups. It's a matter of utilizing the tools of the trade. That means your champion points, your skills, your armor sets, and all those things that we have available to us give us a lot of different options. Now, they're not always going to be the best options, but they are sometimes the only options. Like, for example, let's say I was playing a class that didn't have access to the thing to pull enemies, like chains or frozen device. Well, that's easy. I switch it out, and I grab the next best thing, which would be a gap closer. And I can set it up just like this, so I have access to get to those enemies and be just as effective as I was before. The only difference is, instead of bringing the enemy to me, I go to the enemy and I taunt it. That's all I do. Same setup as I had before. It just works a different way. It doesn't mean that it doesn't work. Now, is this class as effective at this as a like a Templar or DK or whatever? It doesn't matter. And see, the cool thing is that I can still use Pierce Armor, switch bars, and keep this maintained while doing all that other stuff. Now, you're not going to always get the same DPS all the time, trust me. But as you can see, the longer I'm sitting here doing this, the more effective it's becoming. And all I need to do is mainly keep Twin Slashes applied so I get that greater damage and keep Blade Cloak up. Because guess what that does? I don't need to recast Blade Cloak or cast Crusher or do anything. Crusher automatically will reapply because of my heavy attacks, my light attacks, my Blade Cloak, and Twin Slashes. because of the damage that they take upon the enemy. So I can maintain Crusher a lot easier by myself without the main tank's, the need for the main tank, and I can maintain a decent amount of DPS doing the same thing. Now, I'm not doing great DPS, I'm not going to lie. I'm not doing superb DPS, but every amount of damage counts in a group. And this is one of the things that I keep pointing out to people. This is what people are looking for when it comes to options for the end game. It's not a matter of like, oh, well, the DK is the best. It's a matter of, hey, they want to play something else. And using the right tools of the trade can be done with any class. Just because they don't have what the DK has, like the extra block cost. Well, guess what? There's things like footmans. And footmans would give me extra block cost. Now, on a DK, it would give him a greater advantage. But it would help me meet the DK level, almost. This is what I'm getting at. This is when I say, well, you can tank with anything, and you can tank in any gear, because now we have more tools available to us. The champion points, every time the champion points get adjusted to a higher level, that gives us more tools to min-max our characters to give us greater advantage in a lot of different situations. And it's going to keep growing. And the options of tools available through gear sets is going to keep growing, because they're going to keep adding new gear sets. I mean, Dragon Bones is adding 6 new dungeon sets, 2 new monster sets. That's 8 new gear sets. That's 8 new tools available. And some of them are going to be really good for some types of tanks versus other types of tanks. Some of them are going to be really good for some types of DPS versus other types of DPS. Some are going to be good for healers, some aren't. It just depends on the class. It depends on what you're trying to get, the benefits you're trying to get. But this is where like, even when I tell people, oh, well, you only need to do certain things to meet certain requirements to play certain roles, I'm not lying. It's all a matter of numbers, because it's all a numbers game. Anyone can do any role. Any class can play any role. Any race can play any role. Some races are going to be better. Some classes are going to be better. But it doesn't mean they don't work. See, a lot of people have been taught, and it's not, I don't like to point fingers. I don't like to say, oh, well, it's Alcast's fault, or it's Wooler's fault, or it's Deltia's fault, or it's ESO Blob's fault, because there is no one to blame. Because nobody knows who truly created the meta. The meta is one option, guys. One option that works really effectively. But it isn't the only option. And using the right tools of the trade allows you to create a lot more options. Just because it doesn't match up to what the DK can do tanking or the Templar can do healing doesn't mean it can't do it. It's just, we've only seen, since the release of Kraglorn, and literally since the release of Kraglorn, have we seen any other options? We haven't. And that's because the meta is utilized the most by most of the in-game crowd. And most of the in-game crowd is what's making in-game videos. I've seen people play like Sork healers through trials. I've seen people play DK healers through trials. It's not that it can't be done or they're not as effective. They work in a different way. Each class is different. Each race is different. And sometimes utilizing the right race with the right class can give you a better combo than utilizing this race or this race. Like when you see people say, oh, well, when you make a DPS character, you want to run Redguard because of their resource management, it's the better option. In some cases, yes, it is. But in other options, guess what? The Wood Elf's better. And in other options, the Khajiit's better. It depends on what benefit you're trying to get out of the character. Like if I was going to make a Khajiit DPS, I wouldn't worry about running like Hunting's Rage and Vicious Affinity because I don't need the extra crit. I already get it with the race. What I need is more stamina. And I don't get a lot of stamina with that setup. But with Hunting's Rage and, say, Spriggans, I can get the extra crit from the Khajiit. And that Spriggans is going to give me 2 things of extra stamina, which is going to push my stamina higher. It's also going to give me a thing of weapon damage and a thing of penetration that's going to be greater for me in the end game. It's not that it doesn't work. It's utilizing the tools that best benefit you. Just like using Crusher enchants. The main tank is a main tank. Their main role is to be a tank. It's not to be support. It's not to be anything. That is something that the meta crowd believes the main tank shouldn't do, is be a main tank. They want it to be this other option because it was designed to work that way. And it's a good way. It's not that it doesn't work. It works really good. But you know what works better? If you play that main tank as a main tank. You play that off tank as an off tank. And you play your DPS like DPS. You have one DPS that uses the Crusher enchant. If your group splits up, one Crusher enchant goes to one side, the other Crusher enchant goes to the other side. So your off tank will have a Crusher enchant. One of your DPS will have a Crusher enchant. Or you know what you could even do? You could even have one of your healers running Wall of Elements on a charged lightning staff, so they can keep up uptime of off balance with a Crusher enchant on it. Or you could even have them use an infused staff with Crusher enchant instead of that. So that way they can keep that consistency easier than the damage dealers can. That healer that's running the lightning staff that's charged goes with the off tank. The one that's running the infused goes with the main tank, because they're going to use Wall of Elements to keep the Crusher enchant applied. So the main tank isn't as stressed with trying to keep that up. And that off tank, because he's not utilizing that Crusher enchant as much, that off balance is going to benefit that group better. But when they're all working together as a team, they're all getting those benefits applied all together. The off tank and that DP and that character, that healer running the lightning staff that's charged, are going to keep up off balance and Crusher, while that other person is going to keep up Crusher along with that person. So it's just a lot more variety, a lot more utility being utilized in the right way. It's not that it doesn't work. It's that nobody likes it that way, because nobody's tried it that way. Because everyone's been using the same design. I've talked to a few of the in-game players about it, and a lot of them say the same thing. It's the most efficient, it's the most effective. Well, yeah, but have you tried other ways? And they tell me, yeah, we tried other ways, but did you try this? And when I mention it, they're like, oh, they don't reply back, because they can't respond to that. Because they already know it works. Just like when you tank with a two-handed weapon. A lot of people say, oh, well, it doesn't apply Major Breach and Major Fracture. Just because I don't have it doesn't mean somebody else can't use it. If there's a DK in the group that has Noxious Breath, he's applying Major Fracture. Guess who's applying Major Breach? The DPS is. Or the healer might be, with their staff. So if I'm playing a two-handed tank, I can still tank. I'm not going to be as effective as a sword and shield tank, but I can still tank. And we can be, all of us, utilizing different abilities to do different things. This is what utilizing the right tools of the trade means. Is bringing the right group together with the right skills, using the right setups, getting the greater advantage, and then guess what? It doesn't matter how your characters are set up. As long as you're bringing the advantages the group needs to meet those requirements, it can be done. See, when people say that I don't pay attention to the meta, I pay attention to the meta. I just don't play the meta. I just utilize things in a different way to give me different advantages that the meta doesn't have. And sometimes utilizing the right group makeup, like say running through a dungeon. If you have your tank running Crusher, there's greater chance of them dying, because most DLC dungeons are scaled around 300 CP. The only one that isn't, DLC dungeon that isn't, well, there isn't. Because they're all scaled around 300 CP. So if I'm playing at 300 CP difficulty on vet dungeons, I need my character at the maximum potential he can be. Whether it's a tank, a healer, or DPS. And I'm going to do what I can to make my group be organized for that situation. So if I'm running a Crusher enchant while I'm trying to tank and trying to maintain that while I'm trying to tank, it's not going to work. It's not going to be as effective for me to tank. But if I use a hardening enchant, that makes me more effective as a tank. Yes, we lose some of that penetration value, but guess what? I can tell one of my DPS, say, hey, do you still have that infused off, like, main hand weapon that's got a Crusher enchant? Yeah. Could you grab that? Okay, sure. Boom, done. Or, hey, do you have Reaper's Mark? Because I don't have, I'm using my two-handed tank for this. Oh, you do? Would you mind using it? All right, no problem. Boom, done. Does it drop their DPS? By such a small margin, it's not going to make a big difference. This is one of the things that when Alcast talks about some of the stuff he does, when he's showing parses on a skeleton, or even Gilliam, they're like, we have to use these other abilities to make sure we get this stuff applied, because we don't have a way of doing it. We usually have the tank doing this. There's your problem. You're having the tank do it. And you're worrying about the tank doing it all the time. It's not that the tank shouldn't be doing it, it's just that if your tank doesn't have it, guess what? You got to make up the difference. And it's not about being selfish, it's not about being this or being that. It's about organizing your group and utilizing the tools of the trade. And that's what it comes down to. It has nothing to do with being selfish. What's being selfish is when you force people into using certain things or playing certain things they don't want to play. That's being selfish. Like telling somebody, oh, you can't play this tank because it doesn't work. That's being selfish. That's like saying that I can go to McDonald's, but I can only order a Big Mac, which is false. That's a lie. Just because something doesn't work as effective as something else doesn't mean it doesn't work. It's just not as effective. It can still do the job, and it can do it really good. And people are always complaining right now. I mean, all over the forums, people are complaining. There's not enough tanks at endgame. There's not enough healers at endgame. Otherwise, there wouldn't be DPS queuing in this and queuing in that. Well, the reason why is because nobody has any options in tanks to play besides what is available through the meta. And when people do play other tanks in dungeons, if they're not playing to the specifications of the meta, for some people, they will get kicked. Because, oh, they can't do the job. Well, how do you know? Have you gave them a chance? No. You just kick them right out the door because they're not set up as meta. And I'm not doing this to complain about the meta. It's the truth. It's 90% of the problems at in-game isn't to do with the meta itself. It's the community around the meta. That's where 90% of the problems come from. It's 90% is the community around the meta. This has happened in every MMO. But everyone keeps pointing the finger at PvP or PvE with the issues with the changes to the game. 90% of the problems with the changes to the game are on both ends. It's because people find these things like block costs and maximize it to such a degree that it wasn't intended to be that good. It wasn't intended for a 100% perfection. And when you overutilize it, it makes it worse for everyone else. And see, that's the thing in the meta in PvP. There isn't a lot of people running around with block tanks. There is some, but I rarely see block. I don't see as many block tanks as I do people running two-handed and sword and shield. I see more of that than anything else. I don't see a lot of healers running around in PvP. I don't see a lot of DPS running dual wield in PvP. And that's because they found the meta. There's a meta to PvP. There's a meta to PvE. And it's never to blame one side or the other. It's both sides that are overutilizing certain things that are causing a lot of things to change. Because they don't just nerf one thing to benefit one side. They nerf it because both sides are overutilizing it, or it's not getting enough use in one way as it should be in another. Like, okay, take petrification. Works really good in PvE or PvP, but it's not getting any use in PvE. It's not that petrification doesn't work in PvE. It's nobody's using it. So they make adjustments to it saying, hey, let's try and adjust this, get some PvE use out of it. And still make it good for PvP, but without like nerfing it to the point where it doesn't work. They're adjusting the tools to make them fit the design of the game. That's all they're doing. It's up to us to utilize those tools to the greater advantage. And there's a lot of advantages out there. There's a lot of options out there. You have to find what works best for you. And sometimes it might not match up to the options that some people want you to play. Well, that's their problem. If they don't like it, oh well. Because it shouldn't be you that has to change your build to fit their needs. It should be them adjusting to you playing that build and getting over it and playing the game. Because like I said, no matter what, you're never going to have the perfect, most organized group in the game. Even Hodor has issues. You ever wonder why they run so many times to get the perfect run? Is because it's not a matter of mechanics. It's a matter of mastering. And it's a matter of perfection. You can't get the perfect run every time. It takes a lot of skill and training to get those perfect runs and to get the scores that they do, just like that U.S. team. I forget the U.S. side that gets the best runs and everything all the time, but it's the same thing. They do it with practice and training. With the right practice and training, anyone can tank with anything. But to be a main tank, it's better to stick with sword and shield or ice staff. But to be an off tank, you can use anything and be effective in any dungeon setting and be effective in any trial setting. Just as long as you're playing your role, which is main tank, off tank. And this was just a tool that I used to show you guys how little difference there is in the game. Now, is Alkosh better for me to use as a tank? No, not necessarily. DPS would still be better use for it because they get the higher stamina pool. They get the higher ability to make the benefits of the gear more effective for them. Like that 13,520 physical damage. They can get more out of it than I can. So they can get more advantage out of it because they are going to put more into that to get greater advantage. I'm not. I'm a tank. I don't really need Miner Slayer, but it's nice to have for that extra DPS. Do I need that extra weapon crit? Not really. Do I need the extra weapon damage? Not really. But it's nice on an off tank because it gives me that little bit of extra advantage that I don't have when I'm running sets like Eben and Plague Doctor or Eben and something else. But I can still meet the requirements to tank and still be an effective tank. I'm just not going to be a superior tank. I'm not going to be that DK that gets all these extra benefits. When you don't have the tools like the DK does to be the best, doesn't mean that you can't be the best with what you have. And this is where a lot of people have and I won't say it's a misconception, they just don't want to, they don't want to have somebody playing something like this in their group because it's not as effective. And that's because they're chasing the numbers. They're chasing the scores. That's it. That's their end game goal, is to be the best. And you know what? That's fine. If you want to be the best, be the best. But if you want to make the group mechanic work, you have to utilize the right tools of the trade no matter what you're playing. Whether you're playing a tank, a healer, or DPS, you want to use the right tools of the trade to give the group the best advantage possible. And sometimes maybe taking an off tank that does a little bit more damage than normal is going to be better for the group than taking an off tank that's the same as the main tank. See, people used to do this back in Craglorn when it first opened up. They'd run sword and shield, two-handed, things like that, because it gave them a greater advantage to bring DPS. Because they didn't need to apply pressure, you know, like they didn't need the sword and shield when they weren't tanking. They only needed it when they tanked. Just like this build. I have one bar set up for tanking and one bar set up for DPS. Now, is it great DPS? No, and it's not meant to be. It's meant to bring extra damage to the group. Just like this. This isn't meant to be DPS. This is meant to be a tank setup. That's it. I don't have the tools that a DK does. I have to make up the difference. It doesn't mean it can't be done. It just means it works in a different way. Now, can this be a main tank also? If you want it to be, I guess. But you'd have to make some serious adjustments to it. And it wouldn't be as effective at DPS because you're main tanking all the time. But it doesn't mean that you couldn't build a tank with Berserker armor and, Ebon armor. You could, and it would give you the same advantages. It's just, it would be different. It'd give you easier access to health. It would give you easier access to greater DPS, but it wouldn't make you a uber DPS. It just brings a little bit more to the group that you didn't have before. It can be done. It's just nobody utilizes it. And what I just showed you with Alkosh and Berserker armor, now just imagine this Night Mother's Gaze and Alkosh on an off tank. Now that your DPS can use other sets because you got that tank running Alkosh and Night Mothers together and giving the benefits of that to the group. That Night Mother's Pierce armor for the stamina DPS. And they're using Alkosh. Or just imagine if they're running Alkosh or Night Mothers and Sunderflame. Now your other DPS can use other sets to gain greater advantage to their DPS total. Just because something doesn't seem to work good one way doesn't mean it can't work another way. It just means you're not looking at the tools available and utilizing them to the best options. And there will always be a meta. We all know this. Every MMO I've ever played, there's always been a meta. But the options available to the meta change all the time. That's because somebody figures out something better. But we've been using the same meta strategy for literally over a year. I think it's been something like 2 years and like 3 months since Craglorn, the last part of Craglorn came out. It's been 13 months or more since, 16 months since one Tamriel happened. That's almost 2 years. Because it came out in August of 2016. It's 2018 now. It's almost 2 years. And people are looking at this game in the same way that they've been looking at it since Craglorn finished coming out. Because that's when the idea of tanks using sword and board on both bars, and both tanks ran that way, happened. Was after that. They started enforcing that on that area of the game because they found it to be the most effective. They started incorporating the idea of Crusher Enchant as the most effective. And this is where the game's been stuck at the end game since then. Now, they were playing tanks of all classes at the end game. People still do. It's just that there's nobody sharing those ideas. And that's because when you do, you get so much negative feedback by the community because it's not meta. And people just get sick and tired of listening to the argument. They know it can be done. Just like meta players know it can be done. It's just, meta players, trying to focus on multiple builds is really hard. Like if I was going to offer, say, a tank build that was a Sork, like one of every class as a tank, I don't have the characters to do it. I just don't. And if I were to build them all on PTS, I only have the tools available that's on PTS. That's why when I said I'm going to make, a bunch of new builds, I'm only going to have the tools available on PTS to make those builds and offer them to the community. I won't have access to every gear set in the game. I won't have access to everything in the game besides champion points and skills and passives. But when it comes to gear, I won't have access to all of it. So there's no way for me to test every combination and come out with what's best. Because nobody truly knows what's BIS, or best in slot. And that's because this game wasn't designed to have a best in slot, or a best setup. Because there's so many different combinations that work that you can't say one way is better than another. Because you have the options to set your group's dynamics with your own accord. Just like running Hunting's Rage, or running Night Mother's Gaze and Alkosh on an off-tank, they can still run a two-handed sword and board. They can run two-handed and bow, and still be effective. They won't be able to tank everything at the end-game level, like axes and stuff like that, but it doesn't mean that they can't do other things. Are they going to be the best tank in the world? No. But, okay, that's where we're going to leave it. I'm not going to argue it. The idea here is that to open up people's eyes to more options. That's it. You have so many tools available you don't realize. And just because one set works, like crap in the beginning, like say Druga's Heritage set, whatever it is, the one that gives you like, when you drop below 80 or 30% health, you heal for so much. That's not a great set for end game, but it's a great set to help you get there. It's a good set to start with. Just like Spriggan's is a great set to get you there and even to use there. Some sets are like that. Some sets aren't. But utilizing the rest of the tools you have available to take advantage of that and give you the options to make you work is all that matters. And like I said, if you don't have chains, well, you don't have chains. You have a ranged taunt you can use. You have an ability to charge across the room that you can use. You have a lot of options. It's finding that right makeup that makes a difference. You remember my 2032 setup thing? It's the same thing. I just did it here in a different manner. I came up with what was the best advantage to my character overall. But that's it. So if you guys like this video, go ahead and hit that like button. If you guys want to see more videos by me, you can hit the subscribe button. Other than that, thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day. And this guy might see you again. Bye.